face off in a live debate.
And welcome to the 13 Action News and Nevada Independent Democratic debate for the 4th Congressional District. I'm Todd Quinones.
And I'm John Ralston, the editor of the Nevada Independent.
All right, well, over the next hour, no questions will be off limits as we dive into the issues that impact you, the voters, the most. Now, we have a crowded field here tonight for the hour-long debate. There are 5 candidates. Each candidate will have about a minute to respond to our questions, and John and I will do our very best to make sure everyone gets equal time. With that said, let's introduce tonight's candidates. They are John Anzalone, Pat Spearman, Alison Stevens, Steve Horsford, and Amy Vilela. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
John, start us off.
All right, I'm going to start with you, John Anzalone, and we'll go right across. Very diverse group of candidates here, different backgrounds, different stages of your life. As succinctly as possible, tell us why you are the most qualified person up here to be the next congressman.
Well, you know, I got into this race for my kids, for your kids, for all of our kids. I could no longer sit back and wait for somebody else to do so. I was hearing from students, I was hearing from families, hearing from communities that enough was enough. And it seems like every morning we wake up to another school shooting or a violent act, and most recently budget cuts, horrible budget cuts. And as a principal, as a high school principal, we have the thumb on the pulse of the community. And I'll tell you, I work so hard every day for those kids and those families. And to me, wouldn't it be incredible to finally have a voice in Washington coming from education? It's been too long. And I want to go to Washington and I want to bring that civility back, reach across the aisle, wrap my arms around our community, and then come back and make sure that our kids are protected the way they should be. And that's really just the starting point for me. But it's just so exciting to absolutely have this opportunity to not only be here tonight, but have that opportunity to go to Washington and fight for our kids and our families.
All right, thank you. Senator Spearman.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. As most of you know, I'm a retired lieutenant colonel from the Army Military Police Corps, and my last assignment was at the Pentagon. We're living in some perilous times right now, and yes, we all can talk about the economy, we can talk about healthcare, we can talk about all of that, but we are living in a day and age right now where we are probably closer to war than we have ever been. I believe that my military experience, I believe that the training and the wisdom that I learned at the Pentagon, I believe that that uniquely situates me not just to understand the geopolitical situation, but to be able to address that immediately. I also believe that I am qualified, more qualified, because I am an African-American woman. I am a member of the LGBTQ community. I've faced discrimination all of my life. You couple that with the fact that our transgender troops are being harassed, our transgender troops are being dismissed. I believe that I've got to go to Congress so that I can be a voice for those who do not have a voice. I am uniquely qualified because here in Nevada, we have more sunshine than they have heat and hell, and I have spent the last 6 or 7 years studying for my doctoral research global energy policies, and I am ready on day one to take the same success that we have had in Nevada, to take that to Washington so that we can go to the next level, not just state, but we can have federal policies.
All right, thank you, Senator. Regent Stevens.
Thank you. At the end of the day, this is a Democratic primary for CD-04. And there's really only 2 issues that matter for voters in this primary. The first is who can actually represent the issues that are impacting residents' lives. Constituents who are facing issues with healthcare, trying to make sure that their children are educated, that they have access to the proper jobs, training, and workforce development that they need, and also our environment around us, among many other issues that they're concerned about. I believe that I can represent those issues, but the second most important consideration in this race is who's going to be able to take on Crescent Hardy or whomever else the GOP puts up against us and actually carry this through the general election so that we can have representation in Washington, so that we can make sure that we don't have a Crescent Hardy actually working against the residents and the constituents of CD4, but a Democrat who can actually work for them.
Stephen Horsford, you're up.
I'm running for Nevada's 4th Congressional District because, like many of you watching tonight, I'm frustrated with the direction of our country. The chaos, the confusion, the fact that under this administration in just the last year, they have voted to take away health care from millions of Americans. They passed a tax scheme that only benefits big billionaires and corporations and does very little to help middle-class families and small business owners. And I'm running because we have to fight to address the issue of access to universal health care and lowering the cost of prescriptions in this country. I'm proud to have the support of the Culinary Workers Union and the SEIU, as well as Vice President Joe Biden, because they know that I will work hard to fight for Nevada's families each and every day and to deliver them the results that they need on behalf of Nevada's 4th District.
All right, thank you. Amy Vilela.
That's probably a question I'd like to ask a lot of people that are already sitting in Congress. You know, right now we see a lot of people are suffering. There's a lot of people dying needlessly. And the status quo, the career politicians, are not addressing the issue sufficiently for the people. I would bring a unique mix to Congress, both personally as well as professionally. I have been a poor single mother, raising my children, oftentimes relying on WIC, Medicaid, and food stamps. I have also worked my way through college and became a CFO, devoting most of my career to working for nonprofits that work to service people with disabilities. When we hear people in office saying, if you didn't buy the $800 cell phone, then maybe you could afford health care, wow, are they out of touch? Because the average person out there that is struggling is just worrying about which bill do I pay? Do I let my electricity go off or do I pay for the gas? That's the struggle of working families today. And on the other hand, I've heard other senators saying, Senator Corker, well, why did you say yes on that, vote yes on that bill for, the tax bill? His reply was, I didn't have time to read it, and you'd need an accountant to understand this bill. Maybe we need to have accountants in office, and I'm just that accountant, to bring that mix that we so desperately need to Washington, D.C.
Okay, we're going to move on now to immigration. We're going to begin this question now with Senator Spearman. Now, under President Obama, the U.S. Deported more people than ever. He was even referred to sometimes as being called the deporter-in-chief. Yet you didn't hear the outrage coming from Democrats then as you do now under current President Trump's policies. Isn't that a clear example of hypocrisy and what is wrong with politics?
I don't think so, and here's why. Because this is the first time that we've ever watched deportation that tears children away from their parents. That is not only draconian, that is immoral. I believe that what President Obama was doing when he implemented DACA was to make the dreamers who had come here, to make them legal. What we're seeing right now is a process that is designed not just to curb immigration, but it is a process that is designed to send a message. As Chief of Staff John Kelly said, he said, doing it this way is a great deterrent to people coming into this country. I don't think that it is at all hypocrisy. I think that what we're looking at right now is we're looking at a concerted effort to extend racism beyond the border.
Alison Stevens?
So I don't think that that's a fair characterization of the mobilization that occurred when President Obama was in office. We ended up seeing DACA, and we must protect DACA, and we also need to make sure that we're not ignoring TPS, because we have to make sure that it's not just certain people from certain countries that we are focused on. In addition, we also have to move beyond DACA, move beyond that to make sure that we are focused on comprehensive immigration reform. It is not enough. Certainly we need to have those protections, but I'll tell you what, I will, if elected to Congress, make sure that we are protecting people, that we are not ripping families apart. And we certainly know what would happen if we have a Republican in this seat.
Mr. Horsford.
I think really we need to be talking about the central issue here, which is family reunification, which is what immigration policy has really always been about in this country. Regardless of the partisanship, who's done what, people need to come together and solve this problem. I'm proud to have been one of 5 members of Congress to have been the original co-sponsors of H.R. 15 in the 113th Congress, which was the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill, which would have provided a pathway to citizenship for 11 million individuals who are currently undocumented and who wanted an opportunity to follow the law and to come out of the shadows. The fact that we're even talking about DACA alone is not a permanent solution, and I agree with Alison and others who say that we need to focus on the central issue. And the central issue to me is not tearing families apart. I've seen the impact of this. I've faced it in my own family, and I know that we need a representative who is going to do the right thing and work together to finally fix what's broken in our immigration policy in this country.
Okay, Amy Vilela.
I think that's a fair question. We have seen immigrants protesting for their rights for many years, even when we had a Democratic president. We need to send a strong message to Washington, D.C., and send some strong Democrats who have a backbone, that are going to fight for immigrants, and not just people who are protected under DACA, but also their families. We have 800,000 DACA recipients and many, many more people, hundreds of thousands of people in this country that I would say, for all intents and purposes, are Americans. We need to be fighting for them and have a backbone and make sure that we are welcoming them here into this country and that we stand with the immigrants in this country. That's what the Democratic Party should be standing for, and that's what we should be, the party of the people.
And Mr. Anzalone.
This to me is not about hypocrisy. This to me is about dreamers. As a school principal, I see this every single day. It's easy for millionaires and billionaires to direct laws and regulations. But when you're sitting in the middle of it every day, when I have to sit across from families and children that are being ripped apart. You know, I had a student about 4 years ago who came to me, to my doorstep as a principal, with a pillow and a suitcase because she was torn apart from her family at the border. And in 1 year, this young lady became fully proficient in English. And in 2 years, we graduated her. And this happens on a daily basis. I have children that come to me and they look at that classroom door wondering if somebody from this administration is going to take them out of their classroom and send them to a country that they know nothing or very little about. To me, it's wrong, and I'm going to fight against that.
All right, next topic, and we'll start with Regent Stevens on this one. Some of you up on this stage have been very forceful in saying that President Trump, even though he's only about a year and a half into his term, should be impeached. I want to know how you feel about that issue, and if you believe he should be impeached, what should those articles of impeachment say? Regent Stevens.
What I think is important is that we can move forward with an impeachment strategy. That's fine. In the meantime, we need to make sure that we are electing a Democrat to this seat who is going to push back on Trump's agenda. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing scenario. The fact is, we know what will happen if there's a Crescent Hardy that ends up winning this seat. We know that he will go along with that Trump agenda. I will not stand for it. I don't believe in the agenda that Trump has. I don't agree with it. It does not benefit the people of CD-04. And I would be willing to fight against it every step of the way. We are likely to have 3 branches of government in this country where we can have a Congress that pushes back, and the administration is not dictatorial. We can fight back. We have a branch of government that is here for the people. I intend to join that if the people elect me.
Real quickly, though, yes or no, do you think he should be impeached?
Yes.
Okay. Stephen Horsford.
I believe that first and foremost, the Congress needs to complete its investigation. I think Robert Mueller needs to be able to complete his investigation, and the findings of those investigations need to be brought forward to the Congress so that the Congress can act. Clearly, there are violations and poor judgment on whether or not this president is fit to serve. And I believe that those would be the basis for impeachment when and if that occurs. But in the meantime, we need to be focused on the issues that people are dealing with each and every day in this district, from the cost of prescription drugs to the safety of our kids in schools and in our communities, and addressing our economic growth and job creation. So while we complete this investigation, let's not get too distracted on what really are the kitchen table issues that families are faced with each and every day.
Well, I don't want to get too distracted, but I do want you to answer the question. You do believe he should be impeached, right?
I believe that the investigation and the findings of the investigation, both the congressional investigation as well as Mueller's investigation, need to be completed. And once that is complete, if the findings are what they suggest, then he should be brought up on articles of impeachment.
But you don't think so right now? You're not convinced he should be impeached right
The
now?
investigations are not yet complete.
All right, Amy Vilela.
I also believe in due process of law, that we need to make sure that we're abiding by our Constitution at every step, because once we have that in jeopardy, then that's in jeopardy even when we have a Democratic president in office. What I will say is that I also believe that it is a distraction right now. While we've been talking about Russia and impeaching Trump, the Republicans have successfully dismantled net neutrality. They have reversed protections of the EPA. You know, the American Disabilities Act has been weakened substantially. Our schools are under attack. We have so many issues right now that we as Congress people should be really messaging to our constituents, getting the support on the ground and making sure that we are fighting back as much as possible.
You want to give me a yes or no or not?
I really believe, like I said, I believe in the process of law, and I'm not in Congress now, so I would really, I want to make sure that we are not setting ourselves up for in the future, as much as I dislike Trump, that we would set ourselves up then to have one of our Democratic president be under scrutiny.
Okay. John Anzalone.
I would say not at this time, John, because I'm a man as well of evidence and facts. My bigger concern right now is the chaos, is the instability that this president is causing. Every day you wake up, every morning you wake up, you don't know what is going to be said next, what is going to be done next. One day we're working with North Korea, the next day we're not. You know, I'm somebody who has always persevered and always brought stability, not just to my school as a principal, but to my family. And that to me is important. We need to know who we can trust. And right now, I don't believe that we can trust this president just because of the absolute ups and downs every single day. So I would say right now, no, but I would absolutely vote for impeachment if elected, if the evidence was clear and factual.
All right. Senator Spearman.
Thank you. I remember an oath that I took some 40 years ago to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I also know that we are a country which one of the foundations is the rule of law. We are a country that should have 3 co-equal branches of government. We do not have that now. I believe that we've got to let the Mueller investigation continue to proceed forward, find out what is actually at the root of whatever happened in 2016, find out if there has been collusion. We need to find all of those facts out. I don't believe that we should be premature and saying, yes, we will impeach him right now. I believe that the oath that I took, the oath of office that I took as an officer of the United States Army, I believe that that oath mandates that I wait until I have all of the evidence, because for us to do otherwise simply means that we're following his bad lead. For us to do otherwise means that now we don't have 3 co-equal branches of government, but we have maybe 1.5. So I want to see the investigation completed. I want to look at the facts as they are, and then I want to, as my oath of office said, protect and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Okay, we're going to move on now to gun control. And first of all, just by a show of hands, who here is in favor of banning assault-style rifles? Okay, everyone here. So my question is, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Horsford, is if tighter gun control laws can be helpful, if you believe that that's a path we should go down, are you in favor of actually going ahead and confiscating assault-style weapons that are already in the hands of millions of law-abiding citizens? Because we've seen, certainly here in Las Vegas and in other locations, many of these mass shooters have had no prior run-ins with the law before.
You know, that's a great question. Let me be very clear here. I lost my father to gun violence when I was a teenager. This is personal, as it is to many people who have been affected by this. I've seen what it does to a family and what it does to a community. And what I believe is that we need a comprehensive approach to gun safety in this country. The fact that we have lost more children to mass shootings this year than people who have died in active duty, men and women, should say something to each and every one of us. My position is that we need to pass comprehensive background checks. We need to restore the assault weapons ban. We need to close the gun show loophole. We need to eliminate bump stocks. And we also need mental health care funding. And we need to address bullying in our schools. These are, in my opinion, the comprehensive approach that we need to take to really address gun safety in this country.
Okay, but to the question, are you in favor of confiscation?
I believe that we have to be very careful under the Second Amendment not to take away someone's right. But to be clear, assault rifles and weapons of war are not the same as other forms of weapons, and we need to be very careful and make a clear distinction.
Okay, Amy Vilela.
In cases of domestic violence, or when we see people posting where they're in danger to themselves or to others, yes, I would support some confiscation on a red flag. Many other states have this already in place, such as even Indiana has a red flag law on the books. We need to make sure that we are protecting our children and individuals throughout the community. That being said, I am very supportive of the Second Amendment. I believe that there are a lot of responsible gun owners, but we do need to have some gun safety laws put into place to make sure that we have those protections. You know, making sure we close the gun show loophole, banning bump stocks, even a waiting period. And it's interesting, the #1 death by gun is actually suicide. So this is a very comprehensive problem, and it's complex, and we need to address it on all levels, both social, economic, and also mental health.
All right, John Anzalone, are you in favor of confiscating assault-style rifles?
I think we need to be careful about that, more for the fact that we would have to send National Guard, we'd have to send our men and women into homes and basements and who knows where to put them in harm's way. I worry about that. But for me, it's a bigger issue. It's personal. You know, I'm the only candidate here that has put out a comprehensive plan for school safety and to make sure that our kids are safe. And it really, really is a bigger issue. It's more than mental health. It's infrastructure. We need to make sure that our schools are hardened but discreetly enough to where it doesn't look like a prison. We need to make sure that we hire school psychologists because of the huge shortage we have right now, more counselors on hand to help our students. We're forgetting about these little ones that are in need and facing depression every single day, and we're not helping those kids. We also need to talk about social media and making sure that our parents are educated on social media and making sure that they're monitoring their children. And at the end of the day, why haven't we done any gun safety for our kids? We show our students and our parents all kinds of videos when they enroll their kids in school, but we never show them anything about gun safety. And that's part of my Nevada Care Plan that I will roll out.
Okay. Senator Spearman.
So I spent almost half my life defending all of the amendments to include the Second Amendment. I'm not for confiscating, but I do believe that what we ought to do is look for a comprehensive way to make sure that assault weapons, which absolutely have no place in civilian society, make sure that, #1, they are banned. I also believe that we should be able to come up with a way to incentivize owners who have assault weapons to understand that getting them off the street is part of a moral obligation to make sure that they don't fall into the wrong hands. We've got to make sure that in our background checks, and which last 2016, Nevadans passed comprehensive background checks. It has yet to be implemented. I believe that that is one of the best ways that we can do that. This last session in 2017, I sponsored Senate Bill 124, which takes weapons out of the hands of stalkers, domestic abusers, and takes weapons out of the hands of people who have extended TPO. When we start and look at assault weapons, when they fire, it's a rapid fire, and within a matter of 2 or 3 minutes, you can gun down 40 or 50 people. That is wrong. I fired an AR-15 before. I fired an M16 before. There is no place for that in this country in terms of civilian society.
Okay.
I think we can incentivize.
Thank you. We have to move on now. Alison Stevens, same question to you. Are you in support of the idea of confiscating assault-style rifles?
Yeah, I also agree with comprehensive gun violence prevention. And there's a lot of things that have been mentioned here, from background checks to future sales bans to gun show loops. I think all of that is just common sense. But I think the question was about confiscation. Yeah. And so what I want to be clear on is it does us absolutely no good to ban future sales if we already know that there are weapons out there on the streets. So while I don't agree with confiscation per se, I do think that we can be a little bit more creative than that. I do think that we can create programming, we can provide incentives, we can find ways where we're not sending National Guard out to people's homes. And I also want to just reiterate, we know where Republicans are and we know where Crescent Hardy is going to be on this issue. If elected, I will be able to take this view of gun violence prevention all the way through the general to make sure we actually have someone who is advocating for Nevada families in Washington.
All right, thank you all so much. Right now we're going to take a moment and take our first break. But when we come back, we'll talk about the Me Too movement as well as Yucca Mountain.
District 4. We have all 5 candidates here. We're going to start this one with Amy Vilela. And as Todd mentioned before the break, all of you have expressed some degree of support for the Me Too movement. It's captured a lot of headlines over the last few months. The person in this seat right now has been credibly accused by multiple women of sexual misconduct. That's Congressman Kewin. Why should he not resign?
He definitely needs to resign. The position that he has right now is so important. Apparently that he needs to be concentrating on making sure the people in this district, and by extension America, are safe and working for them. You know, I was the only one that in this race, that came out and publicly said he should not run for office or run again for this district. We need to make sure that we have a strong Democrat in this seat that's going to put the needs of the people first and take that job seriously. That is so important, and we cannot be distracted by behaviors that, you know, unfortunately was said it was an open secret. We need to be able to talk about these issues loudly, but we also need to make sure that we have restorative justice, that we talk about this in a way that brings us to an open conversation and takes us on a path going forward that we can eradicate this behavior in the workplace.
John Anzalone, does it send a bad message that he hasn't resigned?
You know, I think it goes back to due process, John. I think this ethics committee should have met right away. To drag their feet, I don't know if that was a political move or what it was. I would have liked to know exactly what happened and hear all the facts. So to me, it's none of my business what his decision was. To me, if this did happen, it's so immoral and so wrong, and it just goes with the entire pattern that's been happening in our country.
You say if it happened, I mean, you don't find these women credible?
Oh, absolutely. But again, that's what the Ethics Commission is there for. And I think that should have been speedy, it should have been expedient, and happened already.
So you don't think he should have resigned?
I think the Ethics Committee should have met a lot sooner.
All right. Senator Spearman.
I've had a Me Too moment in the military, and I know how egregious that is, and I also know how humiliating that is. I'm not exactly sure all of the circumstances around the allegations for Congressman Kewin, but I believe, as John does, I believe that there should have been post-haste investigation so that the people of Congressional District 4 would know exactly what's going on, not just a year later. Let me say this. When we talk about the Me Too movement, we're talking about people who have power and want to use that power in order to get what they want. We've seen this week. We've seen Harvey Weinstein. We've seen people come out against coaches with the Olympic swim team. We've seen people who come and talk about what happened with them in R. Kelly. The Me Too movement right now is about people who have had that to happen to them, people who have been sexually assaulted, sexually harassed, taking their voice and saying no more.
These women, though, Senator, they've come out in the national media, in the local media, and they've made very serious, incredible, and in most cases corroborated accusations. I got to finish up here. You were saying he should not resign.
I'm saying that what the Ethics Committee should have done was to move swifter, and once we have the facts and the evidence, that if that shows if that's exactly what it is. Let me say this, John, you know how hard I worked to make sure that one of my former colleagues paid the price for his indiscretions. You know how hard I worked with the women in the legislature who had gone back some 20 years, 2004, 6, 8, 11, 12, 13. You know how hard I worked for that. I believe that just as Senator Aaron Ford did, said the investigation must proceed. It doesn't mean that I don't believe the women, but it means that we've got to have evidence.
All right, Regent Stevens.
So Congressman Kewin has decided not to run for re-election, and I'm not here to go back and answer any questions about what happened with him. What I am here to do is to talk about the situation that we're in right now, where we need to be able to elect someone who is going to represent CD4, and that includes these issues. That includes federal policy that is going to provide the protections that women need in the workplace and outside of the workplace. We should not be having these Me Too moments anymore. What has happened is women have been silenced for so long that now they have a voice. Now you know that there's someone else who's had this experience. We need to take that, convert it into comprehensive policy at the federal level that is going to protect women from this kind of hostile work environment.
Does it bother you that he's talking about making a political comeback now? You say it's fine, you don't want to go back and revisit this. Again, this stuff is all out there. You don't think he should have resigned.
So I'm going to correct you. I didn't say it was fine. What I said is that I'm here to discuss the situation that we're in now, which is the need for us to have a representative in CD4.
Okay. Stephen Horsford.
Well, I agree with what's been said about the fact that the Committee on House Ethics should have acted quicker. We're in the end of May. These are assertions and allegations that were made at the end of last year, and the fact that they have not acted to determine any findings is a problem. And it's why I support Congresswoman Jackie Spears' reforms that have been passed, which would increase the standards in the Congress, as we should have in every sector, public and private, to change the culture so that these types of incidents are not tolerated, that there is a process for people to come forward to report the information anonymously, and for there to be quick investigation, review, and findings so that you can act.
Real quickly, though, these women who made these allegations, they now have to wake up every day seeing that Ruben Kihuen is still a congressman. Doesn't that bother you?
It absolutely does, and that's why we should expect more from every elected official and every person in power.
All right, we're going to move on now. We're going to move on right now to crime and technology. Okay, we just recently reported that Amazon is trying to sell its facial recognition software to law enforcement agencies. The technology would allow police potentially to identify and track people in public who have not committed any crime. Is this a bridge too far? And if so, what would you do to try and stop it? We'll begin with you, John.
It's definitely crossing the line. It's getting onto that wave of potentially, getting a little bit too personal. We saw this happen with Facebook. We saw that the sales of personal information for monetary gain really crept into people's personal lives to the point where it became almost stalking. And I can see that happening here. So let's learn from our history. I think it's very important as a former social studies teacher to tell you we need to learn from our history. And this is recent history. We have to be very, very careful of the water we tread here with that specific issue.
But would you actively try and prevent law enforcement from obtaining this sort of technology?
Again, I would have to know more about it, look into it. This is a very fresh idea, and before I make a firm decision, I'd have to know a little bit more.
Okay, Senator Spearman.
We live in a day and age where technology has brought us many conveniences, but I don't think that we should sacrifice our personal security or our privacy just to have those same conveniences. I think that it is a bridge too far. I think that what law enforcement has to do, we keep talking about technology. I believe that one of the things that law enforcement must do is to go back and be a cop, constable on patrol, meet with the people in the neighborhoods in which they walk the beat. I think that when you start talking about just using technology as a way to identify, what you've in essence done, what you've done is you have taken away innocent until proven guilty. I think that it's wrong for us to do that, and I think there's some things that go too far, and what I would do is I would say let's put more money into patrolling the neighborhoods, more money into cultural competency, more money into training people to be neighbors again, more money into doing those things. And until we do that, I don't care what kind of technology you try to do, we're never going to be able to straighten the situation out.
Okay, Alison Stevens.
So I think we need to reform our entire policing system. We have so many issues going on, from mass incarceration to the things that we see happening on these dash cams and body cameras that are clearly ill-advised, and there are several issues with training, and that includes things like cultural competency. So we need to be looking at our policing system overall and how it's being handled. What are the tools that we are giving police officers? Why do we have such a militarized police force out there on the streets? And we need to be cautious about utilizing this type of technology. What I want to also caution us against is this idea that technology is bad. So we want to make sure that we're providing police the adequate resources that they need to be able to do their job. But we also need to make sure that we're shoring up the system and dealing with the issues that we have that are so prevalent and dangerous to the community that they are supposed to protect and serve today before we jump to this new evolution of utilizing facial recognition technology.
All right, Steve Horsford.
I think it's a false choice that we can't balance local and national security and privacy. I served on the Homeland Security Committee. I've been in briefings on the Fusion Center here in Southern Nevada. I know what technology does to keep the 42 million visitors who come to Southern Nevada each and every year safe, and that keeps the nearly 3 million people who live here safe. So I think it's a false choice. That's why we need representatives who understand the need to balance security with privacy. And I've had to take those tough votes and to drill down on the specifics of legislation, and you can have both.
Amy Vilela.
I think that we definitely need to protect our rights to privacy. We have seen disastrous results and a lot of outcry from the public just from the Patriot Act. This is, to me, just another extension. We're not willing to put cameras on every police officer to ensure that they're abiding by the law themselves and that our citizens are protected. So I believe that this is definitely an infringement. We should be instead really putting some efforts into community policing, building those relationships with our police force. They do, a job that's really imperative for our communities, but to protect their safety as well as the citizens, we need to look at different avenues.
All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. Senator Spearman, you started on this one. Many people might not realize that this district is a very expansive district. It goes up into half a dozen other Nevada counties where they have different kinds of issues, including public lands issues. You'll talk to people out in those areas who talk about taking our land back from the federal government. What do you say to them?
I say the public land should stay public. One of the things that I think we have to balance is how we might be able to use some of those treasures for the betterment of those communities. And by that I mean, if you remember on last session, one of the things that I proposed was to make sure that we expand geothermal. That's one of the things that we can do to keep the public lands public, but also to provide a benefit for those who are in those communities. I don't believe that we should just willy-nilly do away with these types of treasures, because once gone, they're always gone. We asked a question in 2015 during this, the legislative session, so if we get those lands back, then who will take care of them? How much will that cost? And these are questions that even though they're continued asked, we never get a deep answer for them. So I believe that public lands should be just that. What we should be doing is looking at those where it is possible to use them as economic development tools for those areas in the rural communities. I think we should do that, but we should never, ever, ever give up our public lands.
Alison Stevens, what do you say to those rural constituents who say we should take back our land? 87% of it in this state is owned by the federal government.
I say there are scenarios when we need to do that. One of the things that I cite is one of my first jobs in college was working on a BLM land transfer for the Southern Nevada Water Authority so that they could actually go in and find the pipeline. So there are definitely scenarios where we need to work with the federal government to be able to do some sort of transfer. When it comes to conservation and recreation and the beauty and resources that we have, of course we need to balance that with protection. What I think is important is to have someone in this seat who understands the needs of rural communities. And really it boils down to economic development. When you ask people, why do you want to do that? And so it's one of those things that we've worked on in the Board of Regents, making sure that we are aligning our community colleges with business and industry, that we are providing opportunities for workforce development and for jobs trainings. Those are things that can also happen at the federal level through funding, and I intend to work on that if elected to Congress.
Stephen Horsford, they feel pretty passionately out in rural Nevada about this issue.
Well, to be clear, John, the federal government doesn't own these lands, the people own these lands. And I think that's a very important distinction. I've worked tirelessly with advocates in the conservation community to protect Gold Butte, to protect Basin and Range, to make Tule Springs a national park in North Las Vegas and Las Vegas. I have worked closely to designate 50,000 acres of land outside of Yerington for the Wovoka Wilderness designation. And let's just ask this question. Nevada hasn't been able to properly fund education. How is it going to be able to manage 87% of public lands that are now currently managed by Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service, and Wildlife? Let's be realistic about our priorities, and let's continue being partners, state, local, federal government, and tribal government leaders as well.
Amy Vilela, what do you think?
I definitely think that public lands belong to the people and they should not be sold off to the highest bidder. But with that being said, we also need to make sure that the protections we have in place make sense and that we're working with local constituents to make sure that they're not so hardened and so steadfast that local constituents are having difficulties having access to the lands. But we have to also keep in mind that people just don't come to Nevada because of the Strip. They come here also for our beautiful public lands that we have, all of our parks and that people can go and visit. So we definitely have to make sure that we preserve them, and it definitely should stay in the hands of the people.
John Anzalone, you go out into the rural Nevada and you talk about the federal government. It's like talking about Ohio State to a Michigan fan.
You're right, but John, there is a split until you actually go and you visit. And I've been so fortunate to go into several of our rural communities, whether it's Tonopah, Ely, even Pahrump, and there is a split. And to me, what I'm hearing is it's more of a trust thing. If you're willing to listen and you're willing to return, what the people told me is many representatives have gone, but many representatives haven't come back. And they talk the talk, they get elected, and they don't return. That's why I think it's important right now that we elect somebody in this district who actually is trustworthy. I want you to think about this for a second. Who in your community do you trust? That's who you have to elect. You trust your postman, you trust your pastor, you trust your local barber, you trust your school principal. And when you're somebody like me who's been here 30 years and explored all over this great state, these are national and state treasures that people are living amongst and visiting. So to me, this is a people issue. This is listening to the people in those rural communities and then making a decision based on what their needs are.
All right, we're just going to take a moment now for our final break. We'll be back in just about a minute. Up next, Yucca Mountain. Now with our congressional debate here, we also know that the White House has openly entertained the idea of reviving Yucca Mountain to store highly radioactive waste just about 100 miles or so northwest of Las Vegas. So, assuming you oppose the idea, if elected, how do you stop it? Alison.
The most important thing is working with allies and also understanding our tribal communities and making sure that they have a voice. At the end of the day, the answer is no. Nevadans say no, CD-04 it says no, and so we're just going to continue to advocate, build those relationships, and make sure that we're working to move forward so that we're not having nuclear waste at Yucca Mountain.
Steve Horsford, how do you stop it?
This is largely not a partisan issue, although there are a couple members of the congressional delegation at times that have wavered. But from Governor Brian Sandoval, Republican governor, to others, we have unified in our position against the storage of nuclear waste at Yucca Mountain. Why? Because the science says it's not safe. The transportation and the routes that would have to go through our communities by schools and businesses is not safe. It's not good for tourism. So for all of these reasons, I will continue to fight against the storage of nuclear waste at Yucca Mountain. Our position should be a legal one because it's not consent-based. Nevada doesn't want it, and they need to find alternatives. Meanwhile, they've spent $15 billion on Yucca Mountain, and we do need to work to find an alternative use, such as major data warehouse and other uses of that.
Amy Vilela, the White House has made their point clear. They feel like this sort of a storage is needed.
I think it shows a real lack of forward thinking in our government. We are falling behind every other country in developing green technology. One of the things we have to do, though, with this coming right now at us is definitely fight. If we cannot stop it from coming to the state of Nevada, we need to fight to ensure that it comes in dry storage, that there's other methods that makes it safer. In the meantime, we need to be fighting really hard in Congress to push forth a federal jobs guarantee that includes a green energy portion of it, making sure that we are exploring those avenues and becoming the leader in the world on developing green energy. We could do that right here in Nevada.
John Anzalone, can you stop this from happening?
You know, this is really, I agree with Stephen in the fact that this is a transportation issue, and that's a big concern, is a 2-lane road and that getting blocked, trucks falling over. There is that worry. But one thing that Stephen and nobody else really brought up is this is really an economic issue. When you go to the rural communities, the people that want this, the people that actually are proponents for this, are worried about the economy. They're thinking, hey, this could be an economic boom for us. This could be a research opportunity here. That might be true, but that's because there is a major concern about the economy. What happened to our auto shops? What happened to our wood shops? What happened to our career tech ed in our schools? We're doing an okay job here in Clark County, but I'll tell you, in the rural communities, we have kids that are going into the mining industry because there's really not much else to go into. So if we can open up the doors, open up their minds, and actually build some beautiful career tech schools in those areas, we can actually open up the economy for the rural communities. That's when I think people will pull off of it who are the proponents. And I'm absolutely against it. I think it's dangerous right now until we know more.
Pat Spearman, is this something you could stop the White House from doing?
So let me just answer it in a common sense way. First of all, every Thanksgiving, most of my family comes to my house. We eat, we watch football, we eat, watch football, and there are a ton of dishes. It is absolutely wrong for me to take those dishes to my next door neighbor and say, now you have to wash them. I believe that wherever the waste is made, that's where they should figure out how to store it and dispose of it. Here's what I think. During the last session, you might have heard that I talked about some of the mines that we have. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 61 mines that are either closed, abandoned, or in some disrepair. We here in Nevada are second only to California with our resources in geothermal energy. 3 years ago, Department of Energy looked out and said, we're going to put something called FORGE, Frontier Observatory Research for Geothermal Energy. All of the 28 states, with the exception of 2, just Utah and Nevada, are left. I know that in Fallon right now, they have already started drilling down because geothermal is quite compatible with our solar panels. So instead of talking about, and John is right, that what they're concerned about is the fact that they think that this is going to be jobs. We need to look at expanding renewable energy. Geothermal is that, and once we shift the conversation to economic development as it relates to energy, I believe that we can satisfy those concerns.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to foreign policy. I'm going to get a question here. Stephen Horsford, you're first. On this one. Donald Trump's administration recently made the decision to move the American embassy to Jerusalem. Was that a good idea, and why not?
Well, to be clear, this was a policy that actually had been worked on for many years. Senate Minority Leader Schumer, in fact, had been working on this policy for many years. Former President Obama as well.
But he didn't do it. But President Obama didn't do it. So was it a good decision by Donald Trump to do this?
I think the decision notwithstanding, the question is, what are Trump's foreign policy priorities? And every day we wake up with the concern that he's about to tweet another tweet that's going to cause an international catastrophe, whether it be in North Korea, in Iran, or with our allies in the Middle East. And so as someone who's been a strong advocate, an ally of AIPAC, and who has worked across the aisle to make sure that we come together to preserve the U.S.-Israel relationship, I think that we need to focus on the policy and not so much the placement of the embassy.
So would you have supported it or not if you were in Congress?
It really wasn't the decision of Congress.
I know, but would you have supported the president on this?
John, in all honesty, it's a distraction away from the important international issues. Right now, we are faced with conflicts in North Korea, in Iran, and in places all around the world. Okay. And to debate whether or not the embassy should be in Jerusalem or not is simply not the priority issue which you've been talking about at this time.
People are accusing me of distractions a lot tonight, Todd. Amy Vilela, was it a good decision or not?
I think it was reckless of Donald Trump to move the embassy after the long-held position we had in the manner he did. It's adding fuel to a fire. And I know that both Palestinians and Israelis both want the same thing that all of us want here, and that's peace, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness for their families. And I think that as allies to Israel, and also to Palestine. We need to make sure that we are we're helping in that process and not pushing hot buttons and making it worse in those peace processes.
All right, John Anzalone, was it the right decision?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This was another cog in the wheel that Donald Trump threw at our foreign policy and again created more and more chaos. We didn't need it at the time. You know, gentlemen, we have so many domestic issues that we need to be concerned about right now. We have hunger, we have poverty, we have homelessness, we have major school violence, and I can go on. And when we're throwing cogs in the wheel over something that was thousands and thousands of years old, all we're doing is trying to create more chaos. Jump decisions are not what I'm about. I don't think it's what any of these candidates are about. And you've heard that time and time again. We're about, and I'm about, evidence and listening and facts. This was a jump decision, and all it did was stir the pot.
Senator Spearman, was it the right decision?
I don't think it was the right decision, and I don't think it was the right decision for two reasons. Number one, if you look at the timing of moving the embassy, it was about the same time that we were pulling out of Iran. And the joint plan of comprehensive action that was in place, this was part of it. We've always talked about a two-state solution, and I believe that what this did was it compromised us getting there. I've talked to many members in the Jewish community. I've also spoken with members of AIPAC, and everyone is still trying to move towards that two-state solution. And what the president did was another shiny object that he threw out there to take attention away from the fact that we pulled out of the Iran deal, and it made not just us less safe, but it made our allies in Israel less safe. It was a reckless decision, and it should not have happened.
Alison Stevens, was it the right decision to move the embassy?
Again, this was something that was in the works for multiple years. The issue that I have is the way that it was done. We look at the Iran deal, we look at the Paris Agreement, you look at what just happened in North Korea, and what we see is a pattern of the Trump administration being reckless, not working with our allies, and ultimately diminishing the credibility of the United States around the world. That is what this reveals to us. It's the manner in which it was done. We can't afford to continue to let this happen. We can't afford to have a congressman who supports Donald Trump in office, and so I'm asking for people to support Alison Stevens for Congress.
I figured that much. When you say it was the manner in which it was done, you would have supported it, but just not in the manner in which it was done?
I think it goes back to the prioritization. I think that we need to look at our credibility around the world. You see this, again, as a part of a pattern where we are not working with our allies, where we are diminishing the credibility of the United States.
All right, right now we have just about 5 minutes or so left in this debate. We're going to try and get in as many questions as we can. So with that said, now if you can just limit your answers to 30 seconds or less for these questions. Go ahead, John.
All right, Amy Vilela, I think you're up first if I'm
Yes.
keeping it all straight here, Todd. Okay, good. Amy Vilela, if you are elected, will you support Nancy Pelosi as the Democratic leader or speaker?
Well, I will support anyone who is supporting the policies that will help the people. We need to have strong leadership right now, running the Democrats, putting the people first and putting them over profit.
So is that a maybe, or is that a I don't
maybe.
know?
I think that we need to make sure that we have the people's interest first.
All right. John Anzalone, will you support Nancy Pelosi?
John, I would have to get to know Ms. Pelosi on a personal level. You know, I'm somebody who crafts compromise. I do that for a living. I do that every day. And that's why I want to go to Washington. I want to bring some of that back. And I think sitting down with the Congresswoman and you know, understanding her so she can understand me, it's been a long, long time since we've had that kind of compromise. Okay. And compromise isn't a bad thing. Compromise in this chaotic kind of gridlock time right now is a good thing. I think I'd be the guy to kind of sit down with her and speak, and then it would be a maybe.
We got to move out to maybe. Okay, Senator Spearman, yes or no?
I'd have to wait and get there and see, because what I believe we are in a time right now of transition, and I really respect and appreciate everything that Minority Leader Pelosi has done in the past. But I think what's happening right now around the world, around this country, is that people are looking at different options with respect to bold leadership. You might know that Seth Moulton is one of the ones who's looking at more veterans who are in leadership positions in Congress. So I'm not going to commit to anything right now, but what I will say is I will support the person who is elected the leader of this party once I get to Congress, but I've got to make sure that it is that bold and progressive leadership we need.
Alison Stevens, yes or no?
If elected, my one job is to represent the people of CD4. There are bread and butter issues, and the entire premise of my campaign has been bringing real life to Washington. So if it's Speaker Pelosi, if it's someone else who is going to advocate for the policies that people in Nevada need, then I'm on board.
Okay, Stephen Horsford.
Look, the focus really should not be on who the next leader or speaker is. This election hasn't even happened. Meanwhile, people are struggling with rising costs of housing, the fact that people are rationing their medication because they can't afford to pay their rent, buy food, and buy medication. We have children who don't feel safe going to school and entrepreneurs who are trying to grow their business. Those are the issues that people talk to me about. I've had very few people talk to me about who the next leader of the Congress should be.
Okay, we have 3 minutes left, so let's try and keep this going real quick. Do you support the idea of having federal mandatory paid sick leave? John.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our workers deserve it. You know, we have private sector jobs out there where people are barely getting any time off to be with their kids.
We have to keep on moving. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Senator Spearman.
In about 139,000 families are single-parent households, and they're headed by women. And one of the things that people struggle with economically is paid family sick leave. Absolutely.
Yes, Alison Stevens.
As one of those single women with 2 children at home, absolutely.
Mr. Horsford.
Yes, and that's why I'm supported by organizations like AFL-CIO, the Culinary Workers Union, SEIU, the federal government employees, because they also believe in paid leave for all workers.
Amy Vilela.
Yes, and take it a step further. I also will support Medicare for all, and that's why the nurses are standing with me.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left.
And we're starting this time with Senator Spearman? Or?
We are starting, yes, this time with Senator Spearman.
All right, that's what I thought. Senator Spearman, name one action the Trump administration has taken that you support.
It's difficult.
I finally left him speechless.
It's, well, you know, and here's
You all
what-
want to talk about walking across the aisle. Just name one thing that the Trump administration has done that you
and
like.
I don't necessarily know that cooperating across the aisle is something that he has initiated. Can I do that? Yes, I can. But I don't believe that that's something that he's done.
Allison.
Can you
I'm
name
not
one?
supportive of the Trump agenda. I don't believe that's what's in the best interests of the constituents of CD4.
Okay, Stephen Horsford.
I liked the idea that he talked about prescription affordability, but then he released a plan that did nothing to address the cost and actually was a giveaway to the pharmaceutical industry,
Amy?
unlike my plan.
Okay, Amy.
I like that he ignited the Democrats and got us all united, and we are fierce and we are ready to take them on and fight for the people.
John
Okay,
Anzalone,
John.
name one thing the Trump administration did you like.
You know what? This fight against Betsy DeVos is personal for me, and when it's personal, I fight hard. She zeroed out title funding, federal funding for schools when it went to Donald Trump's desk, and I applaud him for pushing it back in, and it saved many, many of our schools.
All right, well, thank you all so much for this hour-long debate. You have been informative. We appreciate you showing up here. That is all the time we have for tonight's debate. Now, we certainly hope you, the viewers at home, have found this really helpful as you try and decide who exactly should be elected to the 4th Congressional District. For John Ralston, I'm Ty Quinones, and for all of us here at 13 Action News, have a great night and a wonderful weekend. Thank you.